All right, team, I've got a hypnotherapist for you today. She goes by the name of Dr. Wendy Doucette. You can book her in Los Angeles, or you can book her for a Zoom call, wherever this episode may find you. And let me tell you something. Boy, did I turn this episode into my own therapy session. Uh-oh. I mean, Dr. Wendy is a real soldier for having to listen to the bullshit that I just, told her against her will, really, at the end of the day. So, while I regret talking about rubbing a cotton sheet on my upper lip to go to bed at the age of almost 30, maybe. But you know what? I'm pretty tits out at this point. Tits out, windows down, smoking a tiny cigarette in the south of France. So who knows? Maybe this episode will make you feel seen in all of your coping mechanisms. But Dr. Wendy really debunks what hypnotherapy isn't. She's not going to have you on all fours barking like a dog. Unless that's something maybe you have to pay her a little extra for. I don't know if you're into that. But she gives some gorgeous little tidbits, about the subconscious. What is a trance state? How can hypnotherapy be a tool for you to optimize your life? Maybe you want to quit smoking. Maybe you want to lose a couple pounds. Maybe you want to forget about the ex who used to leave skid marks on your sheets and try to say it was food. All of those are areas of opportunity within our own lives. So who knows? Maybe hypnotherapy can help you. And god damn is her voice just... Ooh, it's like a room temp ramekin of Kerrygold butter that you just spread on a nice, soft slice of Wonder Bread. So maybe if you're driving, blast the AC, roll down a window, because we don't want to get you in your own trance state behind the wheel. Now, mommy made a little bit of an oopsie. Okay, if you're watching this on YouTube, thought I would really, quote, boss up, if you will, and get a dual camera going on in the studio, in the stew. Now, did I accidentally put in one of the wrong cameras that only records up to 30 minutes? Absolutely. You bet. Now, thank God, the one that cuts out is the camera on me. So consider that an early Christmas present. But you know what? We are trying new things. Are we failing? A little. So you know the deal. Crank that AC. Grab yourself a spoonful of nut butter because you probably haven't eaten in 4 hours. And welcome to Emily Talks Too. Hi, Dr. Wendy.
Hi.
How are we feeling?
I'm excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have so many questions about the work you do.
Okay.
And we're going to jump right in.
I'm ready for it.
But I want to know a little bit more about you and how you got to be where you are now as a hypnotherapist. So I know we spoke briefly on the phone.
Yes.
You were in hospice at one point, right?
Yes.
Okay. So where was that switch?
Why would you do that?
Yeah.
So I worked in hospice. That was actually, I'm just thinking, it was my second. I'm originally from New York.
Okay.
And so when I came out to Los Angeles, I was already licensed as a social worker in New York. Much easier to get licensed in New York than it is in California.
Okay.
And I knew when I was moving out here that I was going to need to start all over, meaning 2 years of experience, supervision, before I can even sit for the licensing exam. But I was a baby social worker, so I was okay with that. And I also wanted to be in California. So rather than just jump into private practice, I really needed to be working somewhere where I could get supervision and experience, because therapists need experience.
Yeah.
So I had some experience, but I was working at AIDS Healthcare Foundation for a while, which was very interesting. And one of the therapists who worked there had gone to work at Cedars in the hospice program. So that was the link. And where I was interested, because I knew someone who was working there and loving the experience, I became interested. And so when there was an opening there, she reached out to me, and that's how I was able to work there. Honestly, some of it was wanting to work at Cedars, and I had worked in hospitals in New York. But another part of it, there was something, and I don't know that I can even explain it to you now. I couldn't have known it then, that was pulling me into this field where some people, even to this day, will say, death, dying, ugh. I was like, death and dying, yeah. I don't know what that was. It might have been my own trauma or my own experience.
Okay.
But there was something that was really appealing about that. And I learned so much. So in probably, like most therapists would tell you, you know, you learn a lot from the different experiences you have, but there is something within us that draws us to eating disorders or draws another therapist to grief. And I have always been kind of interested in grief. So how did I get from hospice to hypnosis?
Yeah.
So I left hospice when I was super pregnant, and not because I was going to have a baby, but because the hospice closed.
Oh, no.
Yes, very sad.
Okay.
There are other hospices, but it really was a heartbreak because I loved working in hospice. I loved.
And this is at Cedars.
This was at Cedars. I loved the people that I worked with. I loved being on a team with doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals. I loved also being able to go into people's homes and do visits with people on hospice as well as families.
Okay.
And got married, got pregnant, hospice closed. And so I took some time off to be a mom. Had 2 kids. We can cut that part. But, you know, it was important. It's just in terms of my career, I did take a step back from working at that time. So when I was getting back into, I always had a private practice. So I would see people, but, you know, it could be 2 people a week. It could be 1 person. It was like throughout that time that I was raising babies, I was still seeing patients, but I wasn't working for an agency, or I wasn't working for a hospital.
Patients in hospice or social work patients?
No, really in private practice.
Okay.
So, you know, people that were coming in to see me for a variety of reasons.
Got it.
And then when my first job back was in a treatment center working in chemical dependency. So a substance abuse inpatient treatment center. And part of the reason that I did that, I was interested in it. It wasn't like my heart and soul, but a friend and a colleague was like, here's a job. And I kid you not, in my mom mode, I was like, thank you. Because I really hadn't the energy or the wherewithal, I think, to know what was next. And private practice, I knew would be throughout, but I did need something that was going to give me some more structure. So feels like a long-winded answer,
Not
but
at all.
So easy to talk to, Emily. I
We're
really
here.
appreciate it.
I'm so excited.
But I will say that some of it was having taken a step back and being in mom mode, but another part of it was that I saw people who are really, really in the midst of addiction with complex trauma, every single person.
Right.
And even though I had a lot of experience and a lot of training, and I feel like a lot of wisdom, I felt totally overwhelmed. I felt like I cannot just sit here and use the things that I learned in school. And I think I'm a good therapist, but part of being a good therapist was feeling like I need something more. I just need more training or more education. But it wasn't so much the addiction piece as much as the trauma piece. And feeling like opening up someone's trauma, which could just be sitting with someone, not saying anything.
Yeah.
And having them share their stories or share their experience. And also sitting with, we talked a little bit about energy, someone who's really in a hypervigilant state, a heightened emotional state. It just didn't feel like listening and validating, interpreting, or even making suggestions was doing anything.
Yeah.
And I could do that. I can talk to people. I'm so curious and I'm interested, but something inside me was like, you need more training or you need something more.
There was like a yearning.
Definitely.
Okay.
And I hadn't felt that yearning before. Some of that might have just been being young and being confident, but I really felt like there has to be something more. And so the timing of that was, as therapists, we received lots of mailings. Now they're emails. Sometimes they're still mailings of trainings and things that you can do. It might be a one-day seminar, it might be a week, but we get like a whole influx of this information. And I had gotten this flyer, really, about like rapid resolution therapy. And really, there was something about the wording of, clearing trauma. That's what it was. I'd never heard that before. You can learn how to clear trauma. I was like, sign me up. And I remember asking some of my coworkers, like, do you want to go to this training with me? People were like, that's weird. No, interesting. But I felt like called and drawn to it. So that was that was back in 2012, 2011, where I went to a training and got really immersed in hypnosis and learning about clinical hypnotherapy and how to utilize it to treat trauma, among other things.
Okay.
And that was it. I just felt like that was the missing piece.
It clicked immediately.
It clicked immediately.
Huh.
I did have I had to kind of suspend some of my New York, critical mind. I don't know if it's New York or it's other, people in my past. Like, this is different. This is weird. Visualizations, and it's very creative. It's very different from traditional psychoanalytic, psychodynamic training. But I liked it.
Yeah.
And it also was very interactive. So I liked the aspect of feeling like I'm not doing something to you. This is something that you and I are going to collaborate on. And I also felt hopeful that if I have these tools, I can actually help the people that I'm working with more than I felt like I was capable of doing.
That's so interesting that you felt that as a therapist, because as a client, I had a very similar feeling along with my therapist, which was a wild thing we kind of went through together. Natalie, if you're hearing this, you are the light of my life.
Aww.
But she, I've been in therapy for years, and I will probably be in therapy for the rest of my life.
You and me both, sister.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
Oh, I'm
That is
obsessed.
a healthy thing.
I love it.
Good.
And, I do think talk therapy is an incredible tool.
Yeah.
And I do think when you're using your conscious brain in ways that does translate to your subconscious through talk therapy. But I was getting to a point where I was like, I feel like there was this whole, that it was like in every school growing up where it was the iceberg.
Oh, yeah.
And you have the tip of the iceberg.
Absolutely.
I felt this whole other part of my brain is not being accessed.
Yes.
And I don't know how to get back there.
Yes.
So,
I refer to that iceberg.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's this teeny tiny part that's pointing out. And I do this a lot too. I point to this is the teeny tiny part of the iceberg is our prefrontal cortex. It's really small. There's differing research on the numbers, but it's something like 10% of our behavior, of our thoughts, of our feelings are ruled by this. So 90% is our emotional brain back here that's underwater.
Yeah.
That is, the rest of that huge mountain.
And it's dictating our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors, which is wild because it's seemingly this thing that we can't just think our way through, or we can't just access it so easily. But it's this locker that holds all of this beautiful shit, honestly.
Yes.
So then, can anyone be hypnotized? Because I always heard if you're more gullible or if you're more suggestible, you can have an easier time.
Yeah. So again, jury's out on this one.
Okay.
My personal opinion is that anyone who wants to be hypnotized, like you're so excited about it, you're open,
Right.
You're like, yes. Yes. Do I know exactly how it's going to go? No. We'll find out if we want to play with it. But I think if there's an opening, there's a willingness, anyone can be hypnotized.
Okay.
Now, I do work with people who are not interested in clinical hypnosis, and I don't use it with them. But I will share with them, there's this tool that I think is very effective, kind of cool. Do you want to check it out? Most people will say yes.
Okay.
To your point, what I didn't realize when I was like overwhelmed at the treatment center was that exact thing that you realized when you were with your therapist. Like, we can talk about all sorts of things, and I can listen and I can validate and I can be with you, but there's something that is not getting in to the part of the mind that is going to change thoughts or change behaviors.
Right.
And we don't have to get too much into trauma, but where trauma gets stuck, if we think about things that happen to us, and it can be really little things that we don't think of as like trauma, those things affect our mind. And when something happens that gets stuck in our mind, guess where it gets stuck?
Subconscious? In the body?
Yeah. So if it's stuck in the subconscious, Emily, talking about it isn't going to really change it.
Yeah.
Kind of like, I know that I should exercise more. I know I shouldn't eat sugar. That's me personally. It's not good for me. Logically, it feeds cancer. But my emotional brain's like, sugar.
Need it.
Right?
Yep.
So it isn't enough to just sort of have this logical conversation. It's great. It's important. And you can also make hypnotic suggestions with your eyes open, not in trance. So we do it all the time. And really, we're entranced all the time.
That is one of my questions.
Okay.
I was like, are we...
Am I talking too much?
No, we're vibing. No, and there's so much to unpack with this, but
Yes.
I was thinking, I was like, is there an argument that we are, in a way, in a hypnotic state at all times?
A lot of the time we are. You know, we
Okay.
talked a little bit about, TikTok, Instagram, right? We are entranced. We are scrolling. I do it. Like, we are in a trance. If you are in a really good book, if you're watching a TV show, hanging out with a friend, hanging out with somebody that you're just vibing with, then you are in some kind of a trance, because in that state, you're not thinking, what time is it? What do I have to do?
Sure.
Oh, I have to do my laundry. You might be. I mean, I'm not in your mind.
Yeah.
But chances are when you're really absorbed in something, and that could be driving home, listening to a podcast, or just, most of us in LA do zone out when we're driving home. It's, our unconscious mind is getting us home, right? We're not thinking,
So terrifying.
where do I go? Where do I turn?
Right.
But you know what? We also have to rely on that, or else we'd be like, how do I speak?
Right.
How do I form a sentence? How do I put my clothes on? So some of these things that we do automatically makes our lives much easier because we've been doing them for so long.
Okay. So then my question, and this may be just because I'm mentally ill, but when I would have this way more as a kid, but I would become hyper aware of all of the behaviors and movements I was doing that my conscious mind was not in charge of. So then I became hyper aware of my breathing, or I was like, this is so weird that my hand is going down to put on my pants. Is that the sweet spot of when you can start to like retrain your subconscious, or is that really just your conscious mind getting in the way? Like, I'm trying to figure out how much of that is my subconscious, that awareness.
Yeah, the awareness is probably conscious mind.
Okay.
As you're thinking about noticing breathing and noticing what you're doing. Subconscious is our programming and what we're doing automatically.
Is that the lizard brain?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So monkey mind, lizard brain,
Okay.
right? The racing active mind that is referred to as monkey mind. And there's different models of the brain too. But if you're wanting to be able to access, I know you talked about this with your therapist. So how did that kind of resolve? Because you had an awareness probably before you were in therapy.
Right.
That there were these two parts of your mind, that there were some things that you were thinking about and some things that were automatic.
Right.
Which, by the way, doesn't make you mentally ill.
Okay, amazing.
It makes you like aware and insightful and awake.
Thanks, girl. Thanks. You know what? It felt like almost this light bulb moment where I realized, and this is maybe not a great image to put with this thought, that there was almost like a really blocked filter between my body and my mind, where my body was having these very loud reactions to things where my mind might be completely calm. So I had a really hard time accepting the fact that I may have anxiety or I may experience anxiety because my brain felt very calm. So I was like, okay, something is not in my monkey brain. something is reacting, whether it's stored trauma, something in my subconscious. So we started to do some somatic work.
Yeah.
She also referred me to a hypnotherapist. And I would love to tell you these two stories. So I went once in high school and then once last year to a hypnotherapist, two different women. And the first one I went to in high school, I actually don't remember why I went there, but I remember we were talking about, fully going to put my ass on blast here, but I have this thing called pilly, where I would rub a soft pillow on my upper lip. It was like a self-soothing technique.
Completely.
And I told her, I was like, I want this to be done. I'm going off to college. This is not cute.
Yes.
No, thank you.
Okay.
And she was like, well, do you take it to the market? Do you take it out in public? I was like, no. She's like, do you bring it over, to your boyfriend's house? I'm like, no. And she's like, what's the problem? What's the issue? And it was so validating. And like that within itself was the therapy.
Exactly.
But she'd be like, you're good. We're fine.
Exactly.
But then the second time...
It's also, let me just say too, before you go on, it's a suggestion that you were able to receive.
Totally.
Because you could have said, I'm going to college. I don't want that. But you were like, oh, it's okay for me to do that when I'm going to sleep.
Yeah.
It is a self-soothing
Right.
thing. And if you had said, I really want to stop doing that, then I would probably explore with you, what is it about that?
Sure.
That's not okay with you, because there's probably a deeper belief that adults or people in college don't do this thing. Even when you were telling me about it just now.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So there's maybe some shame around it, or there's some negative belief
So
that
then
it's not okay.
And hypnotherapy gets deeper into that shame of like, why?
Yeah, like there's a belief that it's wrong, it's not okay, only kids do it, it's a baby, only babies cry, or only, so there's a belief that is probably matching and attached to the behavior.
Right.
And so her saying like, what's the problem, caused your brain to think, what is the problem?
And I was like, there is.
There's no problem. We're done here.
Yeah. I'm almost 30 and I will legit be on FaceTimes with people still with my top sheet, just rubbing on my upper lip. I'm like, this is so wild, but I don't care anymore.
Well, that's the thing though. So you keep doing it because you don't have shame about it.
Yeah.
It's something that's soothing and you don't give a fuck. Like
Right.
you're just like, that's what I do.
We're floating on a rock.
And if there's something that is going to soothe you, that's not alcohol, drugs, cutting, hurting yourself, hurting someone else,
Right.
I would support you doing that too.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm like, it's a little sheet of cotton. Sue me.
Yeah. And you are not the only one. I mean, I've had a patient who brought their like lovey, teddy bear, and kind of a similar thing where I was like, what's the problem?
Right.
People are going to laugh at me. It's going to be embarrassing. What if nobody gives a shit?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what if, and this is a whole other podcast, but what if nobody's looking at you at all and nobody cares?
Totally.
Because they're so busy worrying about their own selves.
Right.
But then your mind is like, oh, like I love when a patient will say, I never thought about it like that before. Maybe it's okay.
Yeah, like giving permission to just like exist is the craziest part of therapy.
Right.
Because then you think, because anxiety is a selfish, I say that with love, a selfish, what would you even call it?
Why is
Disorder.
it selfish?
Because it's very me. It's, what are people going to think of me in this situation? What if I pass out?
Like social
Will they-
anxiety.
Yeah, like you end up very much in your own thinking.
Yes.
And I feel like to just say, what if you have a binky? What if you have a thing?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Next.
And really the antidote for that social anxiety, and it depends on the kind of anxiety, but you're right. It's like, what are they going to think about me? And, what are they going to say about me? Is what if nobody gives a shit?
Totally.
And then I would say, turn the lens out to look at like, are you interested in this person? What,
Right.
as opposed to like, what are they thinking about me? Because you probably are aware of this, but we can control what other people think of us. So they're going to think what they think no matter what we do.
So liberating.
It's so liberating. And one of the upsides of getting older that I love to share with my younger patients and my kids or whoever wants to listen to me is like not giving a fuck is so freeing. And maybe there's a nicer, more professional way to say that. But caring about what other people think of you is such a drain.
It's a waste of energy.
It might happen automatically.
Right.
But if conscious mind can remind you, there's really nothing for me to do about what you think of me, what people who are watching or listening are going to think of me.
Right.
It's really freeing.
Well, then you start to live authentically.
Yes.
And you're like, what do I want to do?
Right.
What feels right for me, not based off of what I think this other person thinks is the right thing for me to do. It removes all the clutter.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, so then this second session, which I'm curious to get your take on, I went to her to try to work through, so I tend to be a little heat sensitive. It started with an autoimmune disease, and I found that I was starting to attach anxiety on top of the heat intolerance. So sometimes I couldn't figure out, am I actually becoming heat intolerant, or am I anxious over the fact that I'm hot? I was adding extra toppings onto this.
So you were not doing that consciously, were you?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so.
Your conscious mind had a meaning attached to that.
Right.
And that's the stuff that you can change with hypnosis or therapy, or both.
Right.
Is what does that mean?
Like, what is the fear there?
What does it mean to be hot?
Sure.
It's hot.
Yeah.
Like, it's cold in here. It's cold.
Yeah.
But we have different body temperatures. We're going to respond differently to it. But does that mean you're sick? You have a fever? Maybe.
It was like a fear, I think, of passing out. Honestly, I think a lot of it goes down to control. We're having a therapy session. Okay. We're here.
We're here.
We've arrived.
I'm here for it.
Oh my gosh. Well, so the whole thing, when we started the session, I could start to feel myself getting into a hypnotic state. And I don't think I'm the easiest person to get into that state, because I have a pretty tight, rein on control.
Okay.
But then something snapped and I couldn't get into it. And I felt like I was trying to pretend to her that I was in a state.
Sure.
And so my question for you is that a me problem, or was that a her issue that she couldn't get me to that space? Or does it not even matter?
Well, we could go with it doesn't even matter, but it's a great question. And for the experience that you had, it could be a we issue. The way that I work with my patients, it's very interactive.
Okay.
So you've had some hypnosis experience, some hypnotherapy. What I explain to people is this is nothing that I'm doing to you.
Which I
That's
feel like
important.
is a big misconception. People think that you're like woo-woo, putting people to sleep or whatever.
I'm not going to put you to sleep unless you want me to, but I probably wouldn't do that anyway. I'm not going to make you quack like a duck, because who wants to do that? Sure. And ultimately, I'm not going to do anything to you. You and I are going to have a conversation. We're going to talk about what your goal is, why you're here in the first place, what you want to work on. And we're going to collaborate on that intention. If I would like you to stop smoking and you would like to decrease your anxiety, then it doesn't work, because I have a different intention.
That was it. You just pinpointed it.
Yeah?
Because
Did she want you to quit smoking?
That was it. I wanted her to put me in scenarios where I was like in a boiling hot room, or I was feeling claustrophobic, put me in a small room and I'm starting to feel comfortable in that. But it started getting very meta. Like, and it didn't, what were you wanting to work on? It was this heat sensation. I think it was claustrophobia, heat sensation. It was just starting to feel comfortable in those spaces.
Okay.
But I think her approach was to work through maybe like family trauma.
Yeah,
like it was.
So here's the thing about therapists. I mean, and I can't generalize, but we go into this for a reason. Most of us have our own trauma. Most of us are wounded healers. I'm the first to admit it.
Yeah.
It drives us. We want to heal ourselves. We can heal other people. Hopefully we're doing both. Hopefully we are healing ourselves. Like when you said, I've been in therapy, I will be. I think that's great, because I think that you wouldn't want to see a therapist who hasn't done his work or her work.
100%.
And we're curious. So as you share this heat thing, my mind is like, oh, I wonder if maybe something happened when she was a kid. Maybe you were in a hot room and you felt unsafe.
Right.
That's what's going on for me. But that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to ask you about that. And it also doesn't mean that you are consciously aware of anything.
Okay.
Most of us have things like, it's weird that I have this thing with heat or whatever. I don't know where that started, or I didn't really have something that caused this. We have learned too in the research in the last, like, I don't know, 5 or 10 years, that there's intergenerational trauma, and there's stuff that's happened to your great grandmother that's in your DNA. That
I feel that all the time.
I mean, but it's great in some ways that we do have this research that backs up. I have a fear of heights, or I don't like being in elevators, but nothing really bad happened. Like, I don't really know why that is. So if you can live with it, you can live with it. But if it's something that you're wanting to change about yourself, then regardless of what caused it, you can still, I would say, kind of titrate what you were asking for, like being really hot and having all that come up, and also being able to soothe yourself in some way, so that there's like a duality of dipping your toe in this thing, being, you know, in a closet, or, you know, being really hot, and being okay, and being able to get out, or being able to cool yourself, or just be able to tolerate the feelings, because what you're describing are sensations, and our mind attaches meaning to the sensations. This is bad, this is dangerous, this is scary. And we're really wired towards the negativity, which, it can cause your eyes to pop out, but it's self-preservation.
Right.
You know, we're really exquisitely designed to not die.
Yeah. And we don't have bears anymore. I mean, we do, but not in our space. So it's like, at every moment in time, where are the threats?
Right. And so, you know, the thought could feel like a bear. And you could have the same sensations, and oftentimes we do. Our heart starts racing, adrenaline coursing through us.
Yeah.
Why? So we can run away from the bear. But there's no bear. So with hypnosis, we can get that sensation, those feelings, and there's no bear.
So then is the point with hypnotherapy to, in a session, recreate the feeling in that moment and then create new meaning to that feeling?
That's one thing we can do.
Okay.
Yes. And even, you know, learning that there's a meaning attached. Sometimes people aren't consciously aware of it.
Okay.
If there's a meaning attached to a sensation or a belief, a behavior, you know, like, I come from a long line of very, like, meticulous women who would not let their hair go and who would not leave the house without makeup. And so I had some stuff around, if I don't do that, I'm not attractive. If I don't do that, it's bad.
Yeah.
And that was my programming. You know, my family meant well. They loved me. It was a different time. But I had to really, like, unlearn the belief, and we all have them. I call them implicit beliefs because they're in our body, or embodied beliefs. But that's what, you know, when people say programming, we all have these beliefs.
Right.
And oftentimes we don't know where they come from, but sometimes we do. And if we can update the belief, if it's not one that's working for us, usually I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy.
Right.
I need to put on a little lipstick, you know, really. Whatever those beliefs are, if they're not working for us, then we can update them so that we can experience sensations in a different way, because then the meaning has shifted. Okay. So it's one thing that we can do with hypnosis is really get to the belief system underneath the behavior or the symptoms.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
So then how, like, if I were to come in and have a session with you, what would it look like then? Because obviously you don't have a little hand watch that you're like.
I might.
I mean, who knows? But I know with the last session I went to, there were little techniques where I was looking at a light behind something and I could feel my eyes start to drop a little. So do you start with techniques to kind of get in that suggestible headspace?
Yeah, I do a lot of talking, as we're doing today. So, you know, I would really want to get like what I would call a target or an intention. You know, what do you want to work on?
Yeah.
Why are you here? What's the goal? And that sometimes can take some time to really like fine tune and figure out. In the meanwhile, we can build rapport and connection, and you feel safe. That's a biggie for me, is safety.
Right.
Not just for me, for lots of people. Oftentimes when stuff happens to us when we're kids or adults, it's a safety issue. We weren't safe. Somebody wasn't there. It's really, really important to be working in any kind of trauma modality that you feel safe, that you feel connected. I also work on Zoom, and so it's a little bit different, but I still have that conversation where it's really important that there's trust and that you're feeling safe.
Okay.
What you're asking about too is like, how do you elicit hypnosis? How do you get into it? So if I feel like there's a connection and we have the target that we're going to work on, I also check in, like, we're ready to go, and you want to, like, you know, go, I will say too, like, go inside, you know, go in, or play with some hypnosis. So there's different ways to elicit a trance. And one way, kind of like you were saying, you could look at the light. I don't have any kind of equipment or anything fancy, but one way when I'm starting out with people that I do like to invite them to play with is looking at a spot on the wall. If you look up, you know, something like above my head, something that's not moving. There's something about looking up too that can kind of like start to focus your attention. But you can look anywhere. Sometimes I'll just say, you know, you can take a big deep breath in, and when you exhale, allow your eyes to rest gently closed. The reason that I start with the open eye elicitation is because not everyone feels safe closing their eyes. And so with that, like looking at the light like you did, I will say, you know, your eyes might get tired. You might feel like closing them. You can rest them closed, or you can leave them open. Whatever feels best for you, whatever feels safest for you. Because again, it's important to me that it's not just like, close your eyes.
Right.
Let's go. Which I don't know that people necessarily do that, but I wouldn't want to be told. And again, sometimes when people have a trauma history, it doesn't feel safe to close your eyes. And when someone tells you to close your eyes, like, I don't want to close my eyes.
Right.
So lots of invitations. You might want to rest your eyes closed, or you might want to keep staring at that spot, whatever feels best for you.
Okay.
Doesn't that feel better than like,
oh yeah.
So sometimes I do this sort of take a deep breath in, you know, allow your eyes to close. It just kind of depends on who I'm working with.
Okay. So then I want to bring up, I feel like when people think of hypnotherapy or hypnotist, they think of the carnival.
Oh yeah.
The OC fair.
Yeah.
And I remember being in high school and going to the OC fair, and a friend of mine went up on stage and the hypnotist was able to get everyone to dance to Britney Spears in like a full-blown hypnotic state.
Wow.
Is that legit? I mean, can you get someone in a trance-like state to do whatever you suggest?
I don't.
Okay.
A stage hypnotist is at the LA County Fair, or they're in Vegas. So chances are people are drinking. They might be like wanting to have a fun experience. So a hypnotist, like a stage hypnotist is what you're talking about.
Right, like performance.
Yeah, they're able to pick out the people who are going to play along.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so the people who are shy or don't want to dance or are scared are probably not going to volunteer.
But that goes back to the gullible thing, right? Like they're kind of preying is a very aggressive word, but picking out people who may appear to be easier to get into that state.
Maybe, but again, if you think about being in Vegas or even at this county fair and people are drinking, then they're more vulnerable. They're more disinhibited.
Right.
They're more susceptible. So it's hard to say, but I get this question all the time. So it's a really great one to ask. And also the consent is important, you know, the respect, the connection. So I've had experiences where we talked a little bit about TikTok, and there are people on TikTok who are doing hypnosis, and I don't know who they are. And, you know, they might ask you to consent and give permission, but I don't know them. I don't feel safe with them. And so I'm less likely to go into trance with people I don't know.
Right.
I have mentors and people I've trained with, and I just hear their voice and I will feel calmer. They might be teaching and I find myself entranced because I'm just so used to their voice and I know them and I feel safe with them. So there are people who are more open, I would say, and maybe more hypnotizable. But what I do in session, as you know from your experience, but for people who are watching this, is not at all
So
stage
far
hypnosis.
from it, yeah.
And also what I will talk to you about or talk to anyone about is you're in control of this experience. So you can keep your eyes open, you can keep your eyes closed. There's nothing that I'm doing to you.
Right.
We're collaborating on what we're going to work on. I'm just a guide. So I'm going to be talking, I'm going to facilitate this. You can open your eyes at any time. You can tell me what you're noticing or what you're experiencing. And I might check in with you as well. So our mind has this capacity to slow down, quiet down this part of the mind to access the emotional brain. And you don't have to be asleep. In fact, it's probably better that you're not asleep.
Right.
And you don't have to be out of control to do that.
I think that's people's biggest fear.
Of course.
Because you're seeing this woman like meowing on stage and you're like, I don't want to do that.
No.
And there was one where the guy, I still think about this. He brought a couple on stage and he asked the woman, what do you wish he would do in bed more? And so she whispered to him.
Just what you want to talk about in front of a whole audience of people.
Wild.
Yeah.
And so she whispered it to him.
Okay.
Her boyfriend was in a hypnotic state. And he did his work on the boyfriend basically. Whenever she says this word, you will then do this act.
Right.
Is there a world where when they went home, every time she says that, like, do you lose full authority?
I don't think so.
Okay.
And someone else you might talk to might disagree with me. So I'm going to just share my gut, sort of my feeling, and also what I've learned and what I understand. If that word causes him to do something that gives her pleasure, that she likes, he might be consenting to that. He might be okay with that.
Okay.
If what that word is eliciting something for him to do that doesn't feel okay, either he doesn't like it or he doesn't want to do it, you're going to get disagreement in your brain. The disagreement will come, from your mind. No. So again, if I want you to stop smoking and you're working on something else, then there's disagreement internally. It's not just you saying no to me. Your mind is like,
Because we're not robots.
doing that. No, and we're not going to do things that don't feel safe, and we're
Right.
not going to do things really that we don't want to do.
Sure. So it's not like something you hear the word and then he's just like going down on her. That wouldn't happen.
I mean, it makes for a good story, so maybe it's true, but I've never had that experience before.
Okay.
And I think that you want to really tap into what your motivation is. So again, if I see someone who says like, my wife really wants me to stop smoking weed, but I love it.
You're not going to change.
What do you want to work on?
Right.
Maybe talking to your wife about it, but I'm not going to hypnotize you to stop smoking weed when you love it.
Right. Because then the desire isn't there. I think about people in my life, if they're dating someone just so unsavory and everyone dislikes that person.
Yeah.
My friend is not going to break up with them if they are still in it. Like they have to come to the decision themselves to be like,
Yes.
this is not serving me anymore. But it can be so frustrating.
I was going to say, it's tough when you're witnessing that and it's a friend. And I mean, I have that with people I work with too. It's like, I can't, we can help them along the way. We can support them.
Right.
But the truth is, for that to stick, your friend has to recognize this is not my person. And it's very tough to not share.
Right.
And not, I think as a friend, it's a little bit different in a therapeutic relationship.
Sure.
But
you can be like, what the fuck are you doing?
yeah. I mean, I guess I will just say that you're not going to do anything that you don't want to do, consciously or unconsciously.
Okay.
And so it's really important, I think, for people to feel like I'm not doing anything to you. And we're also not going to do anything that we haven't agreed that we're working on.
There's like hyper consent involved.
Hyper consent.
Yeah.
And it, for me, it's a process. You know, they might have consented to working on something different, but I'm going to be checking in with them too. Like, is this okay? And so kind of back to what we were talking about before, I might check in, like, what are you noticing now? Because I might see if someone starts to cry when their eyes are closed, I don't know what's going on. And so I might check in, like, what are you noticing right now? Because I'm in it with you, but maybe some emotion just came up. So I think it's also important to know that you can say, I'm okay, it's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Or there's someone scary here.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's helpful to be able to continue to be in conversation when someone's in trance.
Okay. We are such a complicated, I mean, I look at a bird sometimes and I'm like, peaceful. Peaceful.
Right.
You bang each other, you have some eggs, and you get the food. We're like, but what about the meaning? It's just like, shut
But you bring
up
up a really good point. So when I talk about how the mind works, I talk about animals.
Yeah.
Because you know what? To your point, bird's not like resentful because some, other bird dumped it.
Right.
Or some bird got the worm before
Sure.
it did. It's not all pissed off.
They just move on.
They just move on and look for another worm.
Right.
And so if you can channel your bird, your inner bird, and recognize, you know what, maybe nothing, it doesn't mean anything. What does it mean? I'm not suggesting we don't explore stuff, but what if it doesn't mean anything?
Or does it mean that thing that we thought?
For sure.
Yeah.
And so if you can be more like that bird who doesn't have this part, and birds are amazing. Birds are beautiful, and they can mate, and they can, procreate, and they can fly around and get food. Like, they're amazing.
Yeah.
They're not storing information, which is what human brains can do.
Right.
And they're not attaching meaning to this stuff.
I mean,
so,
peace.
Right. So if
Peaceful.
so just that peace, if you can really peaceful, channel your inner bird sometimes and be like, I just want to float around. I just want to
Get my
do my
nuts.
thing. Yeah.
And just vibe.
Yeah.
Vibe in the sky.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That can be something that's a resource for you.
Totally.
Right? Yeah. Good stuff.
So with each episode, I do some word association.
Ah.
So I'm going to give you 4 words.
Okay.
And just tell me the first thing that comes to mind.
Love it.
Lucid dreams.
Psychedelics.
Affirmations.
Beneficial with hypnosis.
Perfect.
More than one word, sorry.
No, it can
I know.
be a
I don't want to even
phrase.
think too much. I want to just.
It can be, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, trance.
Cool.
EpiPen.
Life-saving.
Love.
That's
love.
it?
I love to
Just
throw in a
love,
little
love.
little
EpiPen.
random one.
Yeah.
So then what is kind of the strangest or most interesting thing you've done hypnosis with? Or someone coming to you being like, I want to X, Y, and Z.
Oh, my goodness. Gosh, there's so many different ones. I'm
sure.
having a hard time thinking of something.
Well, is then smoking the most common? Is that kind of like the typical?
I really do work with a lot of trauma, but
Okay.
people definitely come, I guess weight loss too, weight loss and smoking.
Okay.
And then it's getting to what's underneath that behavior. Because again, someone might come for smoking cessation or weight loss and have different ideas of what that looks like for them. So rather than just like jump into hypnosis, I really want to do a thorough assessment and understand when this started and how it's affecting you, and if you've tried, different things in the past. But like with weight loss, and to your point of different modalities, like hypnosis alone isn't necessarily going to stick. It will help, and it can help change thought patterns and behaviors. But you got to also like eat well and exercise,
Sure.
or maybe there's a medical component, and people are taking medications now, as we know, for weight loss. But with those medications, you're not addressing the emotional piece. And with food, with smoking, it's the binky.
Yeah,
It's self-soothing. So I'm not going to take away your binky. First of all, if you don't want me to, definitely not going to take
You
it
have to
away.
be
But I'm
willing.
not going to take it away. And I used to say this a lot when I worked in treatment. I'm not going to take away all your self-soothing tools, alcohol, meth, cigarettes, weed, whatever your substance of choice is, food, gambling, sex, love, without replacing it with something. Because what you have been doing, you and most people, is trying to regulate their nervous system, try to calm themselves down, try to soothe themselves. And so I appreciate that. Like, you found a way to stay alive. You found a way to manage all of the pain or whatever it is.
Right.
And usually when people come see me or they're in treatment, you're recognizing this is actually not helping you anymore. Maybe it never was, but it's not helping you now. And so I would work with them around ways that you can self-soothe, and hypnosis is one of them, but things that you can do so that you're not just giving up the things that make you feel safe and comfortable, but we're going to explore together maybe some healthier ways or some ways that aren't harmful to you.
So is replacement always the move? Like, I'm thinking about my dad is sober, but he very much replaced drinking with exercising. So the mechanism, the addict is still there. Is there a way to break down the addict so that you don't have that? Because some people say it's hereditary. Some people say you can get rid of addiction.
Well, now we know trauma's hereditary. So I would want to clear up if there's some stuff there, some trauma stuff. I think that the jury's still out in terms of the addictive personality or the people who struggle with addiction. Kind of like eating disorders too. I think that you always have it, but you learn how to manage it.
Okay.
So if your dad is managing it with exercise, he's not using, but that can be excessive too. So having some awareness that the behavior could be compulsive, right? Or the thinking about it might feel obsessive. That I don't know if it has to go away, but if the person is wanting to go away, I would explore that with them too.
Okay. I'm trying to figure
addiction's
out
tricky.
I know.
Yeah.
Because how much of it is biological, clinical? Is it like a serotonin disruption in your brain, or can you? Because I'm sure if you told an addict, oh, you actually, there's a way to not be an addict anymore, that would be very off-putting.
Yeah.
So.
And their being an addict has helped them in some way, shape, or form.
Totally.
It's protected them. It's soothed them. It's distracted them. It's helped them feel joy. You know, all the things. And so that's where I'm like, I'm not going to take that away from you. But also, if you lost your job and your relationship and you have no money and you are destitute, or maybe not, maybe just like your life has become unmanageable, as they say in the rooms. And at that point, rock bottom or not, do you want to do something differently? Like, do you want to live your life differently?
And I want my therapist to have anxiety, in the sense that there's an automatic understanding. We speak the same language. But sometimes I would ask her, I'm like, if you're a therapist and you help other people with these things, how come you have anxiety still? And I think of that with anybody in any healing capacity. How do you still have anxiety? And please know that I'm asking that with so much love in my heart.
I'm trying to figure out what you would apologize for in that question.
Because I don't want it to seem like you are unqualified, or you're, just because you have anxiety, then you aren't a good hypnotherapist.
No,
but
it just makes me human.
Totally.
Right? I mean, I think I told you when we were getting started, like, I was feeling a little bit anxious. I've never done a podcast before. And we just, we're just connecting for the first time.
Right.
And managing it, being able to tell myself, like, I'm excited. And I did some breathing in my car and maybe a little tapping.
Right.
So we're human. So we have, I think, especially in the world that we're living in, if you're paying any kind of attention, I don't know anyone who's not struggling with their mental health to some degree.
Totally.
Depressed, anxious, overwhelmed. Many, many, many people are experiencing that. So I don't know if you're ever like anxiety free. I mean, I'm Jewish, so I can't even imagine that that's like in my DNA. But we can manage it. And I will say that, at 53, after having a lot of therapy and doing work on myself, I have a lot less anxiety than I used to carry around with me. And also, I know that I'm not my anxiety, which is something I love to teach my patients.
Totally.
Like, you can have anxiety. What does that mean? It's a feeling, it's a sensation, it's a thought, but that's not who you are.
Right, right.
And if that anxiety is doing something for you, like the emotions are trying to get you to do something, it's not necessarily serving you. Sometimes people really like the adrenaline rush, you know?
Could not be me.
And people who like amphetamines and Red Bull and Adderall and all those things. Anxiety is one of those things that really can like amp you up.
It's fuel in a weird way.
It absolutely, you're 100% right. It can be fuel.
Yeah.
So if it's uncomfortable or there's something that you don't like about it, I would kind of start with like being curious about it. I would share with you and for myself, like, what's going on that I'm like, my stomach hurts or I'm feeling really like my mind, with me, it's like my mind's really super fast. So I might just like pause and notice my thoughts are moving really fast. Be kind of curious about that, like kind of sit with that. And
just slowing down, being curious.
Yeah. I just was in a training actually this last week for 3 days, and that was my biggest takeaway was just slow down.
Yeah.
Because too, I want to clear it. I want to heal you. I want to make you better. And I might be getting ahead of myself as well as you, and you're going to sense that. So just slowing down, just for us as humans, this can be a practice that we do, is noticing, kind of recognizing. What we tend to do instantaneously is, I'm anxious, I'm having a panic attack, I'm gonna die. Like
0 to
that
100.
happens so quick.
Right.
You know, if we can kind of notice, oh, there's a fluttering in my chest, my palms are kind of sweaty. I wonder what's going on. I wonder what I might be thinking, or I wonder, just kind of curious, because just doing that is a very different response than, I'm going to have a panic attack.
Right.
So, you know, I don't say this lightly, but with people who do struggle with panic attacks, if we can manage the anxiety and learn some tools to help you regulate your nervous system, noticing it, you're never going to have a panic attack. And by the way, that's a suggestion. You are not going to have a panic attack. Now that you know how to do this breathing, you can tap, you can focus, ground yourself, whatever it is, you can bring the feelings, the sensations down. You can check your thinking and then be like, whatever.
We're good. Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah. I love that. And I think that question that I had for you, that's coming from my own shit that I need to work through. What does it mean to be healed? And what does it mean?
Sure.
I'm just assuming that people just like reach enlightenment and never have anxiety and are just floating in this crazy world.
There you go. So,
Yeah.
Emily, if that's a belief,
Right.
you can check it. Is that true?
Sure.
Like, probably not. I
And
mean,
where am I getting that from?
Where are you getting that from? Where did you first hear that?
Right.
And what if you recognize, like, we're all human, we're works in progress, we're perfectly imperfect.
Yeah.
As therapists, we are not done being therapized and doing our work. That was also reinforced for me in this last week, that it isn't like, why is this shit still keep coming up? Why am I getting activated by some old stuff that I worked on in therapy?
Right.
Because it does.
Right.
And so if I'm like, I'm so frustrated, as opposed to like curious.
Being kind.
And
with
also
it.
compassionate, right? So kindness, being compassionate, instead of beating ourselves up, that alone is a really different response than like, this is coming up again.
Totally.
It's so annoying.
Because that part of you wants the love.
Yes.
If that part of you is coming up and we're like, how fucking, I don't want to feel this. Why are you thinking that? It's like, damn, I just wanted to get your attention for a second.
Right.
But to be kind to it is, I'm still learning to do that, you know?
So if you had like a little baby or a puppy that wanted your attention, what might you do?
Be doting, be sweet, be
I mean, I don't even know if you're a
kind.
puppy baby kind of person like I am, but I asked that question because you wouldn't be kicking it.
Sure.
And you certainly wouldn't be criticizing it.
Sure.
You would not. You'd be like, oh my gosh, you just want love.
Yeah.
You're pure love.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what our emotional brain is. And
Right.
I can talk about again, we could talk for hours, but the emotional brain is like a puppy, and it really is just trying to keep you alive.
Yeah.
And it doesn't know to not pee on the floor. We have to train it to pee outside or
And
pee
do it
on the
nicely.
puppy pad.
Yeah.
And if you think about it that way, you're going to be much more loving towards your feelings, towards
Right.
the emotions, because they're coming up automatically. You're not deciding to feel anxious. It's coming up automatically. So if we can be more compassionate with ourselves and curious, I love those two C's, like,
Right.
I wonder what's going on. I'm thinking that I shouldn't be needing to go to therapy again. Like, well, who decided that?
Totally.
Like, maybe it's better that I'm willing to like notice that this is activating.
Yeah.
And I'm going to look at it. Yeah.
Doing the work.
Yeah.
Well, so I
yeah.
end each episode with the same question.
Okay.
And it is, what do you wish more people understood about you? And I always say that can be within the context of the work you do, or that can just be Dr. Wendy.
That's such a great question, Emily.
Thanks.
I love that. I think that I wish that people, when they meet me and I tell them I'm a therapist, don't, think I'm analyzing them.
Sure.
Or that I'm judging them or diagnosing them, all those things. And I wish that, and I don't even know what people think, but that I'm really coming from a place of being curious.
Right.
Wanting to know them. Like, I really want to know you. I don't. I mean, that's interesting to me. And then also showing people that they can heal. I can help them. Other things can help them, but they have the capacity to heal.
Right.
I wish more people knew that, because I do think that people are really, really struggling with their mental health right now.
Right.
For lots of reasons. And if you can't go to therapy, or you can't go on an ayahuasca retreat, or go to a psychiatrist, then what? So to really know that we have, again, I think I may have said this, but we really do have this amazing capacity to heal.
Yeah, within ourselves.
And we know a lot of stuff. We just are blocked oftentimes. So being able to connect with yourself, however you do that, hypnosis is one way. However you can do that, I think can really be life-changing.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
You are an absolute delight. I feel like I've only had this with one other person in my life. I feel like we lived maybe a past life together.
Yes.
I just want to say
I
that.
know. Yeah. And I will just say too, this has been a pleasure. I was anxious. Like I've never been on a podcast before. And again, full circle back to hospice. I wasn't as like spiritual before working with people at the end of their lives.
Totally.
And it really helped me to see too that it opened me up to that feeling that you get when you know someone or you feel connected to them.
Right.
That maybe we did know each other in a past life.
Who knows?
Who knows? But being
Right.
open to that, and also finding some comfort in that.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we
Yeah.
were like on a ship washing the baseboards together and we were like, fuck this.
Yeah,
I'm done.
Yeah, let's go get a drink or yeah. It's really nice because sometimes you meet people and you can talk to, probably like me, you could listen and you could talk to anyone,
Sure.
but not necessarily feel connected to them.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm honored. Yeah, and it's mutual too, right?
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I want to link your website if anyone is interested in doing
Sure.
hypnotherapy. You are an incredible resource.
Thank you.
So I'll link your website.
Great.
Are there any socials? Any?
I'm not on social media.
I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous.
I highly recommend it. It will improve your mental health.
Yeah.
But that's how a lot of people are connected.
Yeah.
So at this, people are like, what's your handle? What's your Insta? I'm like, oh, here's my phone number
Sure.
or my business card.
Email.
I have a website.
Yeah.
That's drwendydoucette.com.
Perfect.
But yeah, no, I'm happy to also be able to like reach more people maybe than
Totally.
would know to come into my office who could
Love it.
benefit. So yeah, thank you so much.
Of
this
course.
was really fun.
Well, let's go get hypnotherapized.
Yeah.
Love it.
Perfect.